Hey everyone, welcome back to the Diet Diaries. I'm super excited today and admittedly a little bit nervous. I have a really just amazing guest. I'm here with Lauren Chan, and she is a size inclusion activist, a model, a former fashion editor, and was the founder of a clothing brand called Henning. And I connected with Lauren on social media, right? Like the love hate relationship with social media. And she was so incredibly generous to respond to me amongst like I'm sure the millions of messages that she gets, and to be willing to come on and talk about her experience as a plus size model, a plus size swimsuit model, being included and featured in the 60th anniversary issue of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit. So I'm just hi Lauren. Let me just stop talking and introduce you and kind of
Hi.
like dive in.
So excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm
Yeah,
excited for a really dialed in conversation on body image with you.
me too. Yes. Yeah. So actually, I think it's like a perfect place to start. I don't even think I told you. I found you on a post from Sarah Landry, the bird's Papaya, who I now realize that you guys are like friends, which is so cool. I don't know her personally. I've just followed her for years, and she's been like a really transformative person for me just in my own body image work. And she shared the post of you, the photo that you had taken of yourself in the mirror after your shoot day. And I'm like, what is that? And I clicked on it and read your post and read the caption and then started looking at all of your stuff and I'm like, "Oh my god, she's amazing." And that was like how I discovered you, and I think I like reshared that story and you like sent me like a heart DM. I'm like, "Oh my god, like she knows I'm alive." So I'd love to just kind of start there.
Literal least I could do.
I'd love to start there like with that photo that you shared of yourself in the mirror because I saw you in your body and I'm like, that's me. Like I see myself. I'm going to like start crying thinking about it. I see myself represented there and this woman is on the pages of Sports Illustrated. Like and that is such like a mind-blowing thing. I just love to hear more about like what kind of brought about you taking that photo and what that was like for you to share that and then maybe we can kind of just go from there.
Yeah, well, I probably, to be super candid, started taking a photo for my girlfriend. And
Awesome.
then had a moment where I was probably posing and then after posing all day, I mean, not to be like it's so hard, but your back muscles get sore and your hip muscles get sore and your calf muscles get sore,
Yeah.
because I hadn't just like stood like
Yeah.
as I do and like let all my muscles go and like had my natural posture. And I think I decided to take a photo of that. And then after seeing the photo, realized how, for me too, special it was that my body is in the pages of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit because it doesn't look like the bodies that I had long seen
Mhm.
in those pages. I don't meet the size standard or the beauty ideal or the plus size beauty ideal. And
Yeah.
so those things that I model around, like having more weight in the belly and less in the back, um, deserve to be seen too, because
Yes.
they won't be in the selects that I pose properly for and the team selects and then retouches and all that good stuff to make that beautiful image that we see in the magazine.
Yes.
But that's how I really was that day. That's how I showed up. And I just
Yes.
thought it was important to show that, you know, you can you can pose one way and you can exist another way, and they're both very valid.
Yes. Yeah. I think you just mentioned something about like, having weight in the belly and not having like a tush. And I think like what I've seen in plus size modeling is even within that, there's like an idealized body, right? Which
Definitely,
which would be
definitely.
a smaller waist and carrying more weight in the hips and in the butt and in the thighs.
Mhm.
And that was why it was so powerful for me to see you because I carry my weight in my belly. And I have since I was a teenager. And it's been such a huge source of stress and anxiety and all of that for
Same.
me. And so like what has it been like for you to be existing and living in a different body type even within this category of plus size modeling? How is
Yeah.
what's that been like?
Well, I'm very proud to be my size, and I was always very proud of the plus size model moniker. And when I started 10 years ago, I wore it like a badge of honor.
Mhm.
That said, I did not meet the plus size beauty or shape ideal. And so they used to pad me on set. We would bring padding, and kind of it was like as if you were wearing like a Spanx kind of short. thing,
Okay.
and then you would put hip pads in and bum pads in, and you could build those up or down, and that would achieve that ideal shape that the
Yeah.
clients were after to fill out the pant sample in the right way, et cetera, et cetera. And so that has been done away with, as far as I know. I have not been asked
Okay.
to pad in a number of years. I don't own any anymore. Um, but that was like the first thing my agents told me to buy, was like that and a casting outfit and my book and my cards. And so we've made progress in that regard. And I do think that what's so beautiful about the progress that we've made in terms of size inclusion in fashion is the diversity amongst folks who are allowed to be plus size.
Mhm.
So whether that's your race, your gender, your ability, or your body shape, I
Mhm.
think that when you look at the landscape of who's being celebrated, it is definitely more diverse. Although there's not as many of us as there needs to be.
Mhm.
You know, it's not just kind of one kind of person anymore.
Yes. Yeah. I feel that, like, so deeply, and that's, like, what I mentioned before, like, the love-hate relationship with social media, like, to be able to see women with bodies like
Same.
mine representing is really transformative, right? Because I grew up in I'm gonna be 44 in a couple weeks. I grew up in the '90s reading Teen Magazine and 17 and Sassy, and, like, there was no one that had a belly. There was no one with
Mhm.
love handles, right?
Mhm.
There was none of that, and I don't even remember a lot seeing, like, plus size models, certainly not as a teenager, just didn't exist back then.
Yeah, I don't know who it would have been, if anyone.
No. Yeah. So to be able to have access to that now and see that is so powerful, and it's like it's almost it's shocking to hear that, like, I guess it's shocking and not shocking at the same time, that even within that standard, there was pressure to look a certain way and pressure to change your
Mhm.
body. Um, and to see the progress even over 10 years is like a really short period of time. But it's why it's so amazing to be able to have this conversation and share it, because, like, we don't know that behind the scenes stuff, right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, we know
yeah.
about retouch and we know about that, but I would never in a million years have guessed that you had to wear, like, padded shorts to fill out and have, like, a more idealized, quote,
Well, that's the thing,
plus
right?
size
There's that
body.
famous quote that's like Cindy Crawford says something like, she doesn't even wake up looking like Cindy Crawford, because
Right.
it's so true. And the whole industry is designed for us to not think about it that way. The whole industry is like capitalistically designed. I can get mad talking about it, for us to buy it, for us to
Yes.
buy the bullshit. But what
Yes.
really goes into one image is, let me see if I can like really give you the spiel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lay it on me.
So a client would need to take imagery for to sell a product. Okay. So they've made the product, it's likely a sample, which means it's one of one, probably, which means it's either a sample size 2-4 or 14-16. So then they need to cast a wide net for models that fit within those sizes. There are so many model options. Okay. Uh, I probably couldn't even give you an estimate. So after looking at all of the people they want to possibly look at, they pick one person, which in and of itself is like enough to be like,
Yeah.
it's why could I compare myself to that one person when there's a whole plethora of people already employed as models, i.e., worth quote unquote representing, that you might look like. Anyways,
Mhm.
I digress. So then that one person is doing all the prep in the world to show up as a good model. You know, like they might be removing hair, they might be um, hopefully not, but dieting or whatnot. And then they show up on that day, as prepped as they see fit. And then they go into a fitting. They tailor that sample to that model
Mhm.
so that it fits even more perfectly.
Right.
And that model sits in hair and makeup for probably, we're usually budgeted like 3 hours, I would say.
Okay.
Um, More if there's more models, it just takes longer. And then you get into your outfit, you get styled. So then a stylist makes that outfit look even better by pinning it, primping it, adding accessories, what have you. You go on to set, where all the while an entire lighting team and the photographer has been making the perfect set with the perfect lighting. Lighting is
Mhm.
so important in imagery; it can completely change the way you look.
Mhm.
And then after that, you take hundreds of photos, like you shoot all day. And then
That's
after
a lot.
that, the team selects the best one or a handful of
Right.
for each product. And then
Right.
after that, they're retouched.
Yeah. And then
Why on earth should
yeah.
we compare ourselves to that
Right.
extensive process?
Right.
It makes no sense.
It does. It logically makes no sense, but then in that split second of looking at the magazine or the post or
Mhm.
whatever it is, we for all the logic goes out the window.
Mhm.
And it's like that's why I think on one of the pictures that you shared, and I don't know if it was one that was in the magazine or if it was like a B-roll that you shared where you were like, I would never have posed in this way. Like this is the way your
Mm.
belly kind of looked and having some like rolls and folds. And you were like, I would never have posed this way previously. I'm so glad that like I'm able to show this part of my body, which it's like just again, like seeing that representation and it's like remembering like to I'm like losing my words, but not to compare yourself, but also to see someone who looks like you. And in that split second, like it takes a lot of work to sit with that and say, okay, I know what this woman has been through all day. And like, this is her job. And this is like, there's all these pieces to it and saying, I'm okay as I am. And that's why you kind of sharing that photo and saying it took a lot for me to be in this position is like such a good reminder of like that piece of it as well. Like not comparing and then also finding like that acceptance of where I am right now.
Unfortunately, it is all on us to do the mental work
Hmm.
to undo what a
Yeah.
trillion-dollar industry
Yeah.
wants us to behave like.
Yeah.
And it's all on each of us individually.
Yes.
It's all on whether we have the capacity for mental health, the time in the day. And it's up to us to do every single time we see an image. I
Yeah.
wish I knew the stats still, or I wish there was data. I remember it from years ago, but how many images or advertising we see per day. It's like astounding.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
astounding.
Yeah.
So, we often, we like really kind of don't stand a chance. And that's why it's so important, like for us
No.
to talk about it and to just like
Yes.
have a moment of reality. Because if 1 out of 100 times you have the wherewithal to be like, hey, I shouldn't be tricked by this, that's pretty damn good. And I want it to make us all feel better, to have more information and just be like armed with that.
Yes. And I think that's why that picture you shared of yourself in the bathroom mirror was so powerful because it did just that. It was like,
I
yes,
just wanted to break the illusion.
yes,
You know what I
yes,
mean?
yes. Because
Mhm.
we again in that split second, you forget, you don't realize, and you're comparing your day-to-day life without any of those the time, the money, the resources, the expertise, you're comparing your day-to-day life
Mhm.
with that. And it's literally
Yeah.
like, I mean, pardon the cliche, it's like comparing like apples to oranges, completely not
Mhm.
realistic or relevant. So how do you deal with that? Right? You mentioned like mental health.
Yeah.
How do you, as a woman, as a plus size woman, as someone in the LGBTQ plus community, how do you manage all of that emotionally and mentally for yourself?
That's such a good question. I just had a flashback to taking that picture, and I remember after I teared up a little and I said like thank you to my body.
Yeah.
So gratitude, like
Mhm.
I do a lot of work in therapy about gratitude and like taking care of my inner child and speaking from point of view of my higher self and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And in that moment, I just like wanted to give younger me a hug for
Yes.
all the hate towards my
Yeah.
body that I have had. Like now I'm getting emotional
Yeah.
because it was so unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like from that moment to look at where I was standing and to be looking at the shape that I was looking at in the mirror and to kind of to have the foresight that that's what people would have resonated with and
Mhm.
wanted to see the most. I just had this like moment of gratitude. So definitely that. I definitely go to therapy. I definitely talk to friends. And like I said too, I arm myself with as much information as possible. For
Mhm.
me, it's like the more I know, the less power that um, systems have over me.
Yes. Yeah.
And then too, like I use social media, like you were saying as well. It's like a love hate thing, right? I use it. I really try not to let my algorithm own me. So I follow diverse people. I mute or unfollow people who make
Mhm.
me feel like hell. Like even if I work with them or they're my friends, it's like no shade to them whatsoever. But
Mhm.
I can't take it.
Yeah.
So what am I using my own phone for, right? Like if
Yes.
not myself, and it's my own space that I get to curate. And speaking of which, I also did want to mention because you called out that story I had written about posing so that you can see
Yeah.
the more heavy or chubby or fat parts of my body. I saw a post by a creator, and I'd like to tell you their name later so you can put it in the show notes because it's
Sure.
escaping me, and I was
Okay.
trying not to be distracted, and I don't have my phone beside me. But I tagged them at the time, and they, in like a feed post years ago, and I've never forgotten it, said that fat bodies are art too.
Mhm.
And it really stuck with me because we constantly see inspiration images of thinner bodies. And like when I show up to work and there's a mood board on the wall and of all the poses they want you to do, and then the photographer tells you to do these poses, and they're poses that look good or work with the garment when the model is 10 sizes smaller than you,
Mhm.
you know? And then all this thing happens where we become above a size 12, and all the posing is meant to minimize and hide and
Mhm.
flatter and hourglass and cinch and snatch and I mean
Ugh,
there's so many words for
I
it, which
hate that
proves
word
my
snatched. Oh
point,
my god, snatch is the worst word
right?
ever. Yeah.
The body, and you really get used to that, and that's what I have long been doing to do my job. And that post really changed my mind. It said something to the effect of use fat bodies to create art that smaller bodies can't,
Yes.
right? Like in the inverse of that example I just gave, there are things that our beautiful bodies can do that smaller bodies can't. And it's not to be, to take away from them. It's just a difference. And
Yes.
why aren't we celebrating our difference? I thought we were over putting ourselves down for our differences. And so with that in mind, I was able to kind of get to the space mentally this year where I posed in some of the ways that I knew were actually making my belly look bigger,
Yes.
or that weren't quote unquote flattering, and those are some of the best images.
Because you were, like, truly being you, right? I think there was,
Mhm.
like, that I'm fully embodying, like, who I am, and this is me. This isn't like an image of trying to manipulate my body and make me look like something that I'm not.
Mhm.
What you
Or
said
just
that
something that like is very something that I'm not, that like the beauty ideal specifically told me I should be. Because I do think it's
mm,
fun to like, and so not like meaning to correct you. I just like love like playing with this
yeah,
idea with you.
totally.
Like you can be something you're not, but you can be a multitude of things, right?
Yeah,
Like I could make myself look bigger in certain areas. And hell, I do that when I turn around because I want my bum to look bigger.
yeah,
Um, but something that I've really been like noodling on in this space is the male gaze versus the female gaze, and
okay.
like how I've been feeling in that since I came out. And I'm a lot more comfortable in the female gaze, because it's a lot less, I don't know, like singular.
Meaning, like, there's more than one visualization or understanding of, like, what beautiful or what being attractive is.
I think most women think that, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that the male gaze that we like have in the society, and the best example is like the movies, right?
mhm,
That we see in the movies is one type of person. It's a thin girl next door pretty white woman
mhm,
who like doesn't know she's beautiful until
right,
you take the glasses off.
right, right.
And like we're laughing because it's true.
True, right. How has that kind of impacted your work as a model? That shift in coming out and being in a relationship with a woman and understanding the difference between the male gaze on you and the female gaze on you?
I think I've been doing more editorial high fashion work, which is really fun. I just had an editorial come out for L'Officiel Hong Kong, and it's one of my first. I think I did. If I can't even remember, but if I have done other editorials, it's been like under 3 in my 10-year career.
Okay.
So this is a really big deal, and I think it comes from being looser and weirder and more creative, and like
Yeah.
being inspired by the Julia Foxes of the world and a little bit less by the movie stars we've always seen
Yes.
as the beauty ideal.
Yes. Yeah. Something you mentioned earlier when you were getting a bit emotional talking about the way you talk to yourself as a young girl and having the tools now to look back on that. How like what was your struggle with your body like growing up? Like was it something that was from a very young age? How did that kind of develop for you over time?
I was an athlete all the way through college, so
Okay.
I kind of have had, like, if I really think about it, it's kind of a split experience. So I have one side of my experience that was basketball, and I was a center, and I wanted to be like as big and strong as possible. And I was actually kind of a short center. I'm only 5'10", and like the peers that I played with in my high level teams were 6'4", and like
Okay.
two of them went to the WNBA. So
Okay.
that's who I was like in the paint with, trying to physically compete with. So it behooved me to be big and strong. But also, there's another half of my experience where I hated that and I wanted to be as small as possible.
Mhm.
And so, as much as those two things can kind of exist together, I feel like I have the same experience as every single woman I've
Mhm.
ever spoken to,
Mhm.
which is we all had disordered eating and hated our bodies and struggled with that like every single day. And so, it really wasn't until I became a plus size model after college that I was able to kind of just like pull the camera back and be like, wait, I'm gonna get paid for this. I don't know why I wasn't able to do that with basketball. Maybe because I never went professional. Um, but then I don't know. Then I was in rooms with like Ashley Graham and Tara Lynn and Crystal Wren and Precious Lee, and I was like, wow, these are superhuman beauties, supermodels,
Mhm.
and perhaps it was that really changed my mind. But it really wasn't until then that I liked or was proud of being the size that I was.
Okay. And you mentioned, obviously, like all of so many of us, disordered eating and trying to make ourselves smaller. How
Hmm.
has, like, to the extent that you're comfortable talking about it, what has your relationship with food been like, I guess, before you were a model and since
Hmm.
you've been a model and now your body, like, is right, this is your career,
Yeah.
this is kind of part of who you are. I mean, always been part of who you are, but in a different way now.
I don't know that I've been asked this question before. It's a good one. If I really think about it from like a therapy point of
Go
view,
for it.
like I was raised by immigrant families, grandmothers, parents who I mean, like I was mostly around my Chinese family and they really didn't have a lot.
Okay.
And so I think, and there were many people in the family when my dad was young. He has many siblings, and I think that if I were to guess, they probably eat in a way that is very, if I don't eat fast and furious, I don't get any.
Okay.
And so I think I probably watched that because like that's just a habit, right, for
Mhm.
them,
Mhm.
and picked that up. So I have really been okay, so and then you combine that, this is real time therapy, people. And then you combine that with there's good food and there's bad food. And for
Yes.
women, there's like the teenage girls, like everything is bad. Because
Yes.
even and you've got it all messed up, right? Because then you think, oh, avocados are this. I'm putting myself in my teenage brain. I would think
Yeah.
that avocados were bad, even though avocados weren't around all these years ago. I'm aging
Yes.
myself because they're caloric and high
Uh-huh.
fat.
Uh-huh.
But a diet Pepsi would be good,
Right, 'cause it's low
and
calorie.
because low calorie. And
Right.
and when I was growing up, probably similar to you, the no fat, no sugar craze was everything. You remember that? We
Yep.
weren't talking about nutrients and whole food and whatever have you. So as I've grown up, I've found it really healing to get to know my body
Mhm.
from a point of view of what's best for me. I found out that I'm like probably celiac. So
Okay.
that's something that I now avoid, which in the past that's just a stark example for me because I remember like saying, "Oh, I don't like pizza" at school when there'd be a pizza party. Everybody loved pizza. I just was like, I can't have the pizza
Because it was bad.
because it was quote unquote bad. And
Yes.
now I'm in a place with my body where like it's bad for my body because it hurts me.
Hurts my stomach.
It hurts me.
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna walk over all the way to Saragina to get the good gluten-free pizza once
Yes.
in a while,
Yes.
and that's really growth for me. And I'm very um I just feel more like calm. I feel like there's less of like a problem to fix when it comes to, or like a problem to be solved every time you sit down and eat something, right? I
Yes.
don't know. What do
Yeah.
you're okay, so you're about 10 years older than me. How do you like, I would love to know your experience of what it was like, and where did you grow up? I'm from outside of Toronto.
Okay, so I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey mostly. I moved
Okay.
around a lot as a younger kid, but went to middle school and high school in Jersey. Live in New Jersey now, very close to New York City. And I struggled with disordered eating from the age of around 15, 16, all the way through pretty severely up until about like 6 to 7 years ago. Um, and my relationship with food has drastically changed over the last, like, 6 to 7, 8 years as I started to, like, realize that what I was doing was just unsustainable. I was jumping from one diet to a next, right? Dieting was basically a way of life, and
Mhm.
eating as little as possible, or, saving up calories, doing different cleanses and this and that, and these are the approved foods that you can eat, and going to barbecues and parties, and, like, either not eating or bringing my own food, and all these, like, extreme things, and just living in this constant state of, like, low level and sometimes high level, like, misery,
Mm.
and all because I wanted to change how I looked. And for me, it's so funny, like, have you ever watched the show Friends?
A little bit. I'm not like a,
Okay.
I don't
Doesn't
know, the one where but
Okay,
go for
yeah,
it.
yeah. So if we're doing it for the second time now, Ben and I, that's my son, who's 12 or just turned 12, we watched Friends last year, like, from, like, at night, like, it's a show we're watching together. It's like a really nice thing to do together. And I hadn't watched it. I would watch, like, reruns here and there. I haven't really watched it since it was on, basically, whatever, 20 years ago. And put, like, the fat Monica stuff aside for a moment in that whole
Mhm.
issue. I have always, like, idolized Jennifer Aniston. And I'm like, "Why do I do that?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, now I know." Because from the age of 14 to the age of 24 when Friends was on, I was looking at her, and all the jokes that were made about, quote, "Fat Monica," who looked like she was basically a size 14, basically implied that if you look like that, you're miserable, you'll never get married, no one likes you, you're unhappy, and in order to be happy, you have to look like Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox. And so every diet I did, her body was always in my brain. And I'm like, if I do this,
Mm.
if I can just stick with it this time, if I can just do it, if I can just not eat the cake and not eat the carbs and not do this and just be okay with being hungry, I will look like her. Like, I really thought that I could. My body, like, I've been basically I was like a size, like, 10 in high school. I've been like a size 12, 14, basically my entire life. Like, I'm just not built like that. And it wasn't until I finally realized and accepted how miserable I was making myself that I'm not going to
Mhm.
look like that, and I don't need to look like that, that things started to shift and change. And it's such hard work. It's such hard work. And I'm really active on social media and showing my body. And, the work I do for a living is born out of that, right? So I coach women and help them recover from disordered eating and learn, to your point, like, the difference between choosing not to eat pizza in high school because it was bad and realizing that pizza actually makes you feel bad in your body because it's hurting your stomach. Understanding, like, how food makes us feel and how we react to different foods. What foods do we enjoy? What foods make us full? What foods make us crave things? And using that as a way to figure out what to eat and what works and what feels good. Not following some,
Mhm.
like, random list of, like, you can eat this but not that. Like, you can only eat green apples, you can't eat carrots. Like, I've done so many diets with, like, that bullshit. So figuring that out and, like, really learning and paying attention and just showing up for myself. I mean, it's so fucking hard. And it still is hard. I do this
Mhm.
work for a living now, and it's gotten a lot easier. But between the relationship with food piece and then the body image part, it is showing up every day because, to your point, we are surrounded with thousands, millions, who even knows how many images of women in certain bodies, and remembering that, just like there are tall people and short people and people of different skin colors and races and hair colors, there are an infinite number of body types and what it means to be a human being. Um,
Mhm.
and remembering that and showing up and taking action on that. So that was, like, a very long-winded answer to your question. Um,
Isn't it so funny how when you're young and you're like so oriented towards being in a smaller body, and if you look back, it's so much energy and time and missed
mhm,
opportunities, etc. we don't consider it hard work, like you just said. Like, you
Yes.
only consider it hard work when you're doing well for your body, when
Yes.
you're working on your body image and mental health, when you're
Mhm.
like trying to figure out what foods agree with you or what not. Like, the it's equally hard, if not harder, to be in the former state where you're dieting and you're out of control and you don't know yourself and da 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 da. But for some reason, we just accept that as existence, and it's
Yes.
not like extra work on top of our existence. Whereas to
Yes.
be well is extra work,
Yes.
extra money, extra effort, extra bandwidth.
Yes.
It's just so interesting to me.
It is, and because the first, meaning the way of existing where you're constantly obsessed over it, is the norm. It's so
Mhm.
normalized, right? Like, when you talk to your friends or you read a magazine article or anywhere you are, it's always about losing weight, getting fit, looking toned, getting summer ready. It's so normalized that to exist without doing that stuff is the anomaly.
Mhm.
And to your point, back to like the capitalistic society, and because it's all driven by like money and people selling you things and quick fixes and
Mhm.
instant gratification, which is now heightened even more in the age of social media and online shopping and all of this, and having access to way more than our brains are evolved to handle. Um, but yes, like it's like redefining what it is to, I think, like live and exist in a human body, and
Yeah.
redefining like what, not what normal is, but and not even like what healthy is, maybe healthy, but what it is to take care of ourselves, I think, right? And that being on a diet and striving to look a certain way and to have a six pack or cut arms, that's not taking care of yourself. That's not really about health. And that's such like a different, it's such like a, it's just a different way of like orienting yourself in the world.
Every time, well, not every time, because sometimes I forget, but when I have a bad negative thought about my body or the way I look or something to do with that, I ask myself who benefits from me having this thought.
Hmm.
It's never me.
Hmm.
And it's always some business or person's ideas that get to be upheld that don't agree with me and what I need and what I want.
Hmm.
It's always diet industry or this product or this like government, if we were talking about like, poisonous foods or whatever, or the patriarchy and the men that get to thrive within that. It's the answer to my negative thoughts, to the question of who benefits from my negative thoughts, is
Hmm.
never me.
Yeah. I so appreciate you saying that, and that like you still have those negative thoughts, right? You're still working on that, because I think people look at,
We always will be. There
right. It's the
it's like
world.
the odds are so incredibly
Yes.
stacked against us.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's so much we compare ourselves so much to other women, right? And we always think, well, if I just looked like her, my life would be better. I'd be happier. People would like me better. Everything would be better. And the reality is that every woman, pretty much at every size, is doing that, whether they're in a bigger body
Mhm.
or a smaller body. But I especially like when someone sees you, you're like on the pages of Sports Illustrated in a bathing suit. People are going to think, "Oh, she's got it all figured out. She's good. She's like completely accepted herself and never has to think about this and never has to do work, and I wish that I could be like that." And it's like, "No, you still have to do the work. You still have to show
Yeah.
up. The thoughts are
Yeah.
still there. I still
Yeah.
have to do the work to respond to them."
I mean, I think that I'm trying to be as healed as possible, and vulnerability
Mhm.
certainly helps that. Like, posting that image that you saw and loved helps me feel better too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I just am really proud of myself and proud of you and proud of everybody who like is listening to this, because you've come here to do that and you've lasted 34 minutes and 10 seconds. For putting that effort in, because it does you can get better. We'll never be perfect, but you can
Right.
get better. Yeah, for sure. One thing that you mentioned is the word health, and I don't talk a lot about health. I'm not in any way a medical expert. I'm a fashion expert, and I talk about my own mental health and my own body image.
Mhm.
However, when I get posted on the Sports Illustrated channels, uh, like when they post images of me and
Mhm.
it's open to their audience,
Mhm.
a lot of the folks who are trolling and commenting and say negative things say health-based things, like
Mhm.
it's not healthy to promote this, you're going to
Mhm.
have a heart attack, blah
Mhm.
blah blah, stuff like that. And I really am just, this just happened this week, and I'm mind blown by the fact that, I'm going to try not to be harsh here, these people are not intelligent enough to consider that health does not have anything to do with what I look like in a
Yeah.
picture, or what they look like in a picture, or
Mhm.
what a size zero model looks like in a picture.
Mhm.
There are tons of unhealthy things you could be doing to be the size that these exact people would deem healthy.
Yep.
And I wrote back to one of them who told me to play sports or something, and I said, uh, yeah, I do. I'm a college scholarship basketball athlete, and provincial and national team member. And she went, fair enough. So, it's just so interesting to me that that wasn't considered, that to look at someone, you could think that they would play a sport or be healthy or whatnot.
Mhm.
And as an aside to that, we don't have to be healthy as people in bigger bodies to have respect or value.
Right.
I can be unhealthy and I can scream from the rooftops that I enjoy being unhealthy, or that maybe I'm too depressed at the time to put effort towards being healthy. And you know what? That doesn't make me or anyone else in that position less worthy
Yes.
of respect from other people.
Yes. Yes. There's so much morality assigned to health and our definition of health. Um, and like how that kind of again orients us in the
Right?
world. Um, because again, and then it brings up the conversation of resources, right? And privilege and
Yes.
communities and race and gender and sexual orientation and all of these things that impact so many aspects of our health. And when people make, and I saw you reposted a couple of them on your stories.
Because at some point they're just hilarious and I have to come
Oh,
for them.
yeah. I
But
mean, like the ignorance of people, it's just like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the state of our country.
it's
You're
right. It's kind of
Canadian,
like
so
makes you speechless and mind blown that we're still
I
in
know.
different part. And then like I really, really pull the camera back and I take my heat out of it and I take my humor out of it. And I really think, wow, we're in really different places as a country and community, depending on where you live and what media you consume.
Mhm.
And I don't know, you kind of forget. This is what I
Yeah.
mean by saying this only happens when my images are posted outside of my own echo chamber, outside of when people like Sarah Nicole post an image of me and I find you through it, and now we're having a conversation. Outside of that, and on a totally different side of the internet, we're experiencing different realities, really.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And because, like, people choose what they want to expose themselves to, and it does become like an echo chamber of sorts where people are like and then it just continues to reinforce those beliefs, and then we get stuck
Hmm.
in these really polarized, extreme opposite places, and people are not willing to educate themselves, have a rational conversation,
Yeah.
listen, right? Just listen,
No. I want to
and not
stand up for the trolls a little bit and say that, like, I actually don't think people choose to a lot of the degree. I think that they are born into places where either religion or something archaic is in charge of the way
yeah,
that, they're raised and what they think. And then I think that algorithms too are really terrifying. I think
yeah,
that you have to make the decision to choose,
yes,
and that's when and if you choose shitty stuff, and I'm gonna think you're a shitty person, then like hats off to you.
mhm,
And maybe I won't stand up for you, but I do think that it's getting scary, like how
mhm,
passively people can be convinced of an ideology.
yes, yeah. I mean, yeah, again, like that's like the love-hate relationship with social media on like a more
Hmm.
macro level, right? Of
I know. I mean,
how
like, let's not pull that thread because we'll just
yeah,
like we'll
I
just
know,
crumble.
I know. We could go there. Here's a thread I'd like to pull.
Okay,
Um,
good pivot.
a word that you mentioned earlier, and a word that I have a very tough relationship with, which is the word flattering.
Hmm.
In right, I did like a solo podcast episode about this like a month or so ago, talking about it because to me, flattering is always about being smaller, being more
Yeah, it is.
idealized,
Yeah.
right? Oh, wear these jeans, they're flattering to you. This
Hmm.
lighting is flattering to you. So I'd love to hear about like what does that word mean to you? How does it show up in your work? How do you think about it? Like,
Yeah. I
yeah.
wrote something about this in a print issue of Glamour, meant almost 10 years ago now. Um, and I remember being surprised that it ran in print, and I mean, as an editor in house there, you pitch so much stuff, and the print pages are so few and far between that it's kind of like hard to get an idea all the way to fruition in print. And they printed it, and I just remember the outpouring of response from readers. This is when I was starting to kind of like build my army of like-minded people who wanted to heal their body image. Was incredible. They were, I mean, I hadn't really articulated it before. I hadn't really talked about it before. To just see this like response of community to bucking the word flattering was
Mhm.
amazing, and just like a really great memory for me, because I went, oh great, I'm not alone here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, flattering clothes are not supposed to, in essence, be made to make you flattering. If you feel good in flattering clothes, go for it. But it shouldn't ever be the only reason that you're doing something. You know, like clothes and
Yes.
fashion are for self-expression, are for
Mhm.
art, are for discovery, are for function, are
Yeah.
for, to be used in a utilitarian purpose. Um, and flattery, I don't feel like should be among the top 5 reasons that we
Yeah.
get dressed. But unfortunately, as women, it's the number one reason pumped to us from the media
Yes.
all the time.
Yeah.
And yes, it always means smaller. It always means either smaller or more hourglass. And it means like palatable for the beauty ideal and the male
Mhm.
gaze.
Male gaze. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I think that I'm, like, overanalyzing and, like, being
No,
too
you're
hard
not
on it,
at
but I'm like, "Okay,
all.
no, I'm not." Thank you for
No.
validating that. I
And
follow.
even it's like, oh, sorry, go ahead, go
No, no,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even when I wanna feel, like, super sexy, and sometimes, like, I do play into that hourglass moment or show a lot of skin or what have you, I really try not to use the word
Yes.
flattering. I really try to say or type, I guess, whatever I really mean.
Mhm.
Because if flattering means smaller, well, I didn't try to make myself smaller by putting a corset on. I meant to have my boobs at my chin. So let me see that, like, let me
Yeah,
just be real about it. I
yeah,
didn't care what size the corset was. What I wanted was the boobs at the chin.
yes, yeah,
For that one moment of fun and self-expression.
yes.
Again, it's like I really challenge us all to be thinking about the way that we get dressed as a form of self-expression with no good or bad rules. Whether that's from like the morality standpoint of like, you always have to be body positive, or the standpoint of what is acceptable to us, like, you can't based on culture, like don't wear stripes if da 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 da.
Right, right. Yeah,
It should be our fun. It really should.
yes. Yeah, I follow a lot of stylists online, and in some ways it's been helpful, in some ways it's been, like, harmful, and I'm trying to, like, figure that out because
Interesting.
there's
Harmful how? Just because they show mostly straight size people wearing
so,
outfits or
yes, and I do
clothing
make an
availability?
effort. Yeah, I mean, I definitely make an effort and follow, stylists, influencers, women in bodies that look like mine, in bodies that are bigger than mine. Um, there are also stylists that I follow in bodies that are a size 0, and I've gotten pretty good. It's not even so much like looking at women in those bodies because 'cause I've gotten really good at knowing that what something looks like on her, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily gonna look like that on me. It's more about when they use that language. I find that word to be
Oh,
very triggering.
yeah.
And I'm like, "Why are you always saying that? Why are you always making it about flattering?" Or like there's, a stylist who will be like, "These 4 tops are good for bodies like this. These pants, these shorts are good for bodies like this." Or the whole thing like, "I'm too short to wear this. I have a long torso, so I can't wear XYZ." And I'm like, what does that even mean? Who says who?
Yeah.
Like, is that like a
See, like,
rule? Is that like 2
if
plus
I
2 is
was
4?
I
Like,
know.
it's not a fact. It's like all this made up stuff. And I get very like, I have a belly, right? And I'm wearing a belt today. I used to not wear belts because I'm like, oh, they accentuate my waist and my rolls hang over. I'm like, I fucking love this belt. I'm gonna wear this belt. Like,
Yeah.
so it's more about like not letting those like, well, bodies like this should wear this kind of thing. That's where I start to get like, that's I can't reconcile that.
Yeah, yeah. As you're like, as someone who's quite endeared to you, I would say, like, I just think you should unfollow them.
I know.
You got
Right.
really like, that was a whole you
I
really
got really
felt that.
activated.
No, but I mean, not in a bad way. It's good. It's a clue, right? Yeah, you don't need that. You can like
No.
see how to buy stuff elsewhere.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And
The
I've
four
usually heard
tops
about
for
that.
this body is very 10 years ago. That's surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, is there anything else that you like, anything like we kind of didn't cover that you think would be helpful to share? Any skills or tips or just anything that you're like, "Oh, I really love to talk about this."
I mean, I feel like we, as I anticipated, we got through a lot of the good nuggets.
Yeah.
I'll reiterate, um, if if and when you have negative thoughts about the way you look in any capacity, take a second to ask yourself who benefits from you having that thought. I guarantee the answer will never be you. It will always be a business or an ideology under the patriarchy.
Mhm.
Not to be dramatic,
No,
but it's
you're
true.
totally right. Yep.
And I think just having a second to break that thought and kind of honestly, like figuratively, like shake yourself out of it,
Mhm.
has at least been really helpful to me.
Yeah. No, I so appreciate that personally and for everyone. Like, the work I do is all about skills, so to offer that up as something really specific and tangible that people can use immediately in the moment and practice that and get more used to doing that
Mhm.
is incredibly helpful and, like, can be really, I think, transformative.
Yeah. A few other things that are like quick sound bites like that, like our poodle theory, which is like just the quick oh my gosh, like realization. Now I'm losing my words. I'm thinking about dogs. I got all distracted. Poodle theory, which is that like all types of dogs are dogs, and there are so many breeds that look so vastly different. And the winning English bulldog at
Yes.
West, whatever the dog show is,
Westminster. Yeah.
show is going to look very different from the Afghan hound. And if we apply that to people, then how does the same thing possibly not exist?
Yes.
Um, and then my third kind of like shake myself out of it one liner is that just the fact alone that the beauty ideal changes every 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, what have you, from waif to super curvy, and back again, which we're currently in the midst of, should
Mhm.
prove to you that it is not absolute. It is subjective.
Yeah.
Someone or some set of people, companies, ideologies are
Mhm.
setting that ideal,
Mhm.
and
To make
you
money.
don't have to believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love everything that you just mentioned is all, like, fact-based, right? Like,
Yeah. Yes.
it's like stripping.
Indisputable.
Yep, it's like stripping away the emotion and the subjectivity and looking at, like, what's actually happening here, right? Who's benefiting from this? Oh, I think about the dog analogy, that's so funny you mentioned that. I do that, I think about that, like, this is like a factual, objective way of looking at things, and it helps it grounds us, and it helps us kind of
Mhm.
get out of, like, the crazy spiral of the stories we get in our head and be like, "Okay, this is reality, this is what's happening." Um, so I love all of those. Those are super helpful. I'm gonna keep practicing them, and I know that people listening will be really appreciative of those.
I hope
So,
so. Thanks
thank
for
you.
having me. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so grateful and so excited to be able to share this, with my community.
Oh, same. Everybody follow me at LCCHAN, Chan, and
Awesome.
I'll keep posting pictures of my naked belly for you.
Yes, do it, yeah, and I'll tag you obviously in the show notes so it's easy for people to find, and on Instagram and all the places so people will be able to connect really easily.
Amazing. I'm so excited.
Me too.